Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to see on how to add the unity of work pattern. Although we're fine using generic repository of the specification pattern, it doesn't mean that we can't have some disadvantages. And as each repository creates its own instance of the DB context, there can be partial updates. And not only that, but we are also injecting 3 different repositories inside one controller, which may sound a bit of strange. And unity of work create only one DB instance. And by adding the unity of work, we only need to inject one repository into the controller, and the rest of work will be taken care of by the unity of work pattern. The way unity of work helps us to avoid the partial updates is the use of transactions. If you are familiar with them, you get the idea on how this is done. And it means that a set of instructions or the set of operations need to be completed so as to be able to make the changes to the database, and in that case we can't have the partial updates. And without further ado, let's see on how to add this unity of work implementation. And I'm going to go into my project and minimize everything, and I'm going to close everything from here so as to have a clean workspace. And to start, I'm going to go ahead and press right click, and I'm going to say new C# interface, and I'm going to call this as unity of work and press enter. And after creating this interface, we need to drive from the disposable, and it will help us to dispose every method that we'll be using once we are done using it. So I'm going to say disposable, and I'm going to choose this one. And after this, I'm going to add now the interface for generic repository, and you're going to add now the generic type, and you're going to be adding also the task for the completion. I'm going to say generic repository, and I'm going to pass in the T entity in here, and I'm going to call this as repository, and I'm going to give this a type of T entity again, and I'm going to close, and I'm going to say where now the T entity will be all the cross that will be driving from the base entity, like this one. I'm going to choose this. Alright, and after creating this, I'm going to finish off by adding now this semicolon, and I'm going to add a task which will have now the type of int, and I'm going to call this as complete, and it will have this type of int as it is going to now count all of the changes that will be made. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the unnecessary usings on the top, and we'll be having this as like this. And once we are done adding this interface, we're going to add now the implementation class. And I'm going to go into the infrastructure project. I'm going to go into the data, and I'm going to create now the implementation class, and I'm going to say new C# class, and I'm going to call this as unity of work, like this one. And after creating this, I'm going to derive from now the unity of work, and I'm going to remove the unnecessary usings on the top. And once we derive from this, we need to implement the interface. So I'm going to use the quick fix, and I'm going to implement the interface. And in this case, it's going to bring all these methods. We'll be having this for the complete, we'll be having this for the dispose, and we'll be having this for now the repository, which is kind of crucial as we'll be doing everything in here. And once we are now done adding all these methods, we're going to create the constructor so as to be able to have the instance of the database. So I'm going to go ahead and use the quick fix on this unit of work, and I'm going to create now the constructor in here, and I'm going to have the access to the DB context. I'm going to say application DB context, and I'm going to call this as context. And I'm going to create now the private field out of this. So I'm going to use the quick fix again, and I'm going to initialize the field from parameter. And again, we need to remove this like this one, and that looks amazing. All right, let's try to reformat this again, and here we go. And after doing this, as we're going to be having like repositories as now a list of them, it is better to store them into a hash table. And I'm going to add also the private field for the hash table. So I'm going to say private, and I'm going to add the hash table as a type, and I'm going to call this as repositories. And what this hash table will help us with, it is going to store all the repositories that will be in use. All right. And after adding this DB context and this hash table for the repositories, we are going to start now to implement all of these methods. And we're going to start by this dispose, as there is nothing fancy in here. I'm going to say context.dispose, and now we are done with this one. And let's come into this now, this method for the repository. And I'm going to remove this not implemented, and we're going to start now to implement what we need in here. And this is what we're going to say. I'm going to check if now we're having anything into the repositories, and I'm going to say repositories. We're going to check if we have anything in here, and I'm going to say if this is nar, and I'm going to say that repositories, I'm going to add a new instance of the hash table. So I'm going to say equal to new hash table, like this one. All right. And after we are now sure that we don't have anything into here and have to add this instance, we need also to check the type of this T entity that will be passing while we are going to use this method. And the way we do that, I'm going to say var, I'm going to say type, I'm going to first store it in here, and I'm going to say that it's going to be type of, and I'm going to give this as a T entity, as we'll be getting these from now the parameters. And again, I'm going to check the name that will be passed in there, and this will be now the type. And after checking the type, we need to check if we do have the current current type into our repositories. And I'm going to check by checking now the name that we stored into the type. And I'm going to say repositories, and I'm going to say that contains key, and you can see that I'm using this note in here so as to be able to indicate that we're going to check if we don't have this already. So I'm going to say contains key, and the key that we need to check will be now the type. And remember, the type was storing this type of entity, the name that is on there. And after doing this, we're going to open this, and we're going to perform something in here. And once we ensure that we don't have that kind, we are going to initialize now the repository type. So I'm going to say repository type, and I'm going to say type of, and I'm going to say generic repository, and I'm going to add these brackets. After doing this, we are going now to set the instance. As we are now sure that we don't have the instance of these, we're going to create the instance by using the repository type. And I'm going to say that var repository instance is going to be using the, I'm going to be using the activator, and the activator is going to create the instance. And I'm going to say repository. I'm going to start by using this repository type right here, it is, and I'm going to use the method for the make generic type. Here it is. And after this, I'm going to say type of, and I'm going to say T entity. And after creating this, we are going to go ahead and add now the context in here, as we are going to be needing now to use this DB context. All right, so I'm going to go and finish off the statement. Okay, after this, after now we are done creating this instance, we're going to add this into the repositories. So I'm going to say repositories.add, and I'm going to say type, and I'm going to add now the repository instance, like this one, and boom, we are done now. And after creating all of this, we are going to go ahead and return something. And in this case, I'm going to say return, and I'm going to say I generic repository, and I'm going to add the T entity. And after this, I'm going to say repositories, and you're going to access the type from the list of the repositories, and I'm going to be saying like this one, and then we are done. And the next thing that we need to do is now to implement this complete, as we're going to be tracking now the changes that are made to our entities. And the way we do that, I'm going to first remove this, and I'm going to say await and use the auto completion to make the method async. And I'm going to say context dot save change async here, and then we are done. and here forgot to add the return like this one. Okay, and once we are done implementing this one, we can go ahead and explain one more time what we did. First of all, we need to check if we don't have the instance of these repositories in the hash table. If we don't have one, we are going to create this instance, and we're going to check the name or the type of the T entity that is passed in here, and we are going to only correct the name. And after correcting that name, we're going to check for the repositories, these repositories that we have here, and we're going to see if we don't have the key with the exact name that we have. And when we don't have it, we're going to try to make the instance of the generic repository, and we're going to try to add this instance. And after creating this instance, we're going to add this to the repository, and lastly we're going to return this one so as to be able to be using the exact type that we will be passing in here as the T entity. And you can see that we are going to be only needing to use this context once we are going to use the instance of this repository. And once we are done implementing this, we need to register this into our application service extension so as to be able to use it. So I'm going to go into I'm going to search, and I'm going to say application service extension, and in here we're going to add this as a scope like we did for the iProduct repository or for this generic. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say services dot add scope, and I'm going to say unity of work, and I'm going to add now the implementation class as unity of work like this one. All right, and that's it. And in the next video we're going to be seeing on how to use this into our controller, and you'll see the benefit of it. Let me know if you have any problem, write it down in the comment section below, and let me hope you like this video. If you did, go ahead and press the like button, and don't forget to share with your friends so as to help us to grow. So see you there, and stay cool. See you